You're lying in a hospital bed and people can walk in and literally say the words, "Oh, you look so good, you've lost weight, you look so healthy," while you're connected to drains and drips and that you literally cannot survive without. If that's not diet culture, I don't know what is.
I never went to a doctor about it because I felt like I never got very thin, so it felt like it was never a problem.
If you hear you're fat, it just destroys your whole soul, really. Nobody wants to be fat now, do they?
I was anorexic. I spent a large portion of my late teens being clinically terrified of being fat.
You're completely numb and your whole mind is consumed with food in your body.
But even though my fears turned into a life-threatening obsession, I'm far from the only one who has them.
If you put on 5 pounds, how would you feel?
That would be terrifying for me.
19% of UK adults say they've been disgusted by their own bodies in the past year. 80% of teenage girls in the UK say they're scared of becoming fat. And 4% of people in America say they'd rather be blind than overweight.
Diet culture is all about control.
We are told being bigger is bad.
I want to know why. Where did this obsession with fatness come from? And what damage is it doing?
I had a real problem with binging food. I would kind of feel really out of control with food and I'd eat so much that I felt very uncomfortable. And then I would, occasionally, I would make myself sick. I never went to a doctor about it because I felt like I never got very thin. I would kind of do it for a few months and then I would stop, and then I would, a year later I'd do it for a few more months and then I'd stop. I kept thinking to myself, you're doing all this extreme stuff, yet your body's still worse than everyone else's, and that's kind of, that's where the low self-esteem kind of hits.
That self-esteem part is crucial, because that's where we can get into the psychology of all of this. Because we all know the data. We all know that heart disease is the biggest killer in rich countries and that obesity contributes to that. But that's not why I'm scared of putting on weight. I'm scared of putting on weight because of what it might mean about me and because of what people might say when I go out to a bar with my mates. According to this next guy, those worries are hardwired into us before we're even out of nappies.
Hi Mickey, good thanks to you. From the age of 3, children are starting to report body image concerns. But they're also starting to report stereotypes about larger body shapes and sizes. At age 3, children are reporting a perception that people are gluttonous and slow. As children age, then the stereotypes around slothfulness and having a lack of friends become very evident within children around about the primary school age. And then into secondary school age, we see the stereotypes of being sexually undesirable, being unintelligent, and so on.
So a 3-year-old is already starting to think about weight in a negative way. For context, some milestones you can expect at 3 years old include catching a ball with both hands, jumping, and you might become potty trained. So before you can even use the loo, you're being taught to stereotype people because of their weight.
So I would say I was around 12 years old. I went shopping and I bought my first pair of size jeans. I don't even need to go into sizes. For some reason, I must have picked up somewhere that this size was a good size to be. It was acceptable. It was sought after as a young woman to be in that size jean. And something clicked that day and it was like, I've got to stay this size. My eating disorder developed very, very quickly. Mentally, I kind of just shut down. All I would think about all day was calories, my body, exercise, and the obsession just kind of spun further and further and further.
Laura was anorexic as a teenager and now helps other people with eating disorders. I asked her where she thought her body issues came from.
It was definitely about how other people in body types were treated. We literally are in a world where being in a bigger body is mocked.
So you can't see it right now because I'm fully dressed, but when I am undressed, I have scars across my body from my ankles to my stomach to the back of my head, and that was my biggest insecurity growing up. I've had 15 surgeries before the age of 20. My health conditions were a brain tumour, a brain cyst, punctured intestines. They weren't correlated to my weight.
Very windy.
But even though Michelle's illnesses were nothing to do with her weight, body image issues haunted her recovery.
I've had the experience of nearly dying at 11 years old. I worried about the fact that my scar created a fat roll, which meant that no matter what t-shirt I wear, you can see this fat roll. I was worrying about that more than the fact that I just survived life-saving surgery and gone through 5 surgeries in a space of 3 months. My concern leaving that hospital was that I looked fat.
If I think back to when my own problems with food arose, and we're literally going back 13, 14 years, my first introduction to it would have been magazines. One side, they would be talking about people with mental health problems, but the other side of it was a diet. That was my portal into the obsession around it, and I was constantly shown these ridiculous photoshopped images every day, which at the time I just thought was real life.
We probably all think that our aversion to fat and our contempt of bigger body shapes is quite a modern phenomenon.
We're going to talk to Dr. Anna Schaffner because apparently all of this stuff is linked to how we're doing as a society.
In periods of abundance, it's a status symbol to be thin, whereas in periods of scarcity, it's a sign of authority and power to be bulkier when most of the population couldn't afford to be so.
To be clear, in the West, we're currently in a period of abundance, so it's a status symbol to be thin.
The strongest narrative that we have in society is that thin equals good, fat equals bad, and if you are not meeting the beauty standard, then you must spend your whole life trying to meet it. No respite till you die.
All right, everybody, welcome. This is the first ever Anti-Diet Riot Club online summit.
Harry is a co-founder of Anti-Diet Riot Club, which, you guessed it, campaigns against diet culture.
Diet culture is really interesting in the sense that it's often wedded to almost religious ideas of, rebirth and transcendence and purification. So it's a very morally loaded discourse.
I started running, through the place I was working at the time in 2015, they were offering London Marathon spots. So I took one. I think I kind of thought it would just change everything and that I'd get super into running and suddenly I'd be very thin. And I did get into running from training for a marathon. My body didn't really change at all.
We're told to believe that people have a lot of control over their outcomes, and actually we know that that's not true.
Stuart says that there's loads of factors to do with weight that we can't actually control, but most of us don't know that.
This perception that people are fully in control of their weight status doesn't align with the literature. And I think this message of personal responsibility and blame, which we see, is leading to negative perceptions about people, and in particular people with obesity.
How exactly are you meant to lose weight? Is shame going to get you there? Because frankly, shame is not a long-term solution to anything. The main comment I get online is, but you're unhealthy. And I almost want to reply, well, obviously, I've had 15 surgeries. Occasionally it gets to me because my medical record's so traumatic that to say a flippant comment that oh, but you're unhealthy, how dare you? You have no clue what I've been through.
There have been quite a bit of media that has asked the public, is it actually beneficial to stigmatise people? Can it help to solve the obesity crisis? Well, it certainly can't. It's actually very counterproductive.
God bless some of my older family members. I know they meant this with love, but they'd say, don't go to the other end now, make sure you don't get too big. And I'd be thinking, you've literally just told me my worst fear could happen.
The thing is, these criticisms have been going on for millennia.
In the Greek period, fat was not viewed very positively. They associated fat with animality, with sluggishness, with lethargy. They even banished people of bigger sizes from their kingdom, and they also executed slaves who had become too overweight.
We are internalizing these messages, and so we often start to self-stigma, and that's when we start to internalize these thoughts, these feelings, and actually then that starts to impact our own perceptions of ourselves.
People of size experience discrimination in loads of different ways. High body weight is associated with fewer employment opportunities and stunted career advancement due to weight-related stigma. And obese patients are 65% more likely to have undiagnosed medical conditions. And that's a result of misdiagnosis or inadequate access to healthcare. So how do you break the cycle?
I think there's this idea that we all have 90 years on this earth, but trust me, when I was nearly dying at 19, all I was thinking about was all the life experiences I missed out on because I thought I was too fat to join in. One of the biggest body positive things I did for myself was actually removing all weight conversations from working out. As soon as I realised that, and I realised that moving my body is simply using it while I have the opportunity to, I started paddleboarding, I started horse riding, I started doing all the things that I never did because I thought I was too fat to do, because that's what society tells you. The moment I started doing that, I had an appreciation for my body for simply what it does rather than what it looks like.
We are basing our whole self-worth on this number on a scale, or, you know, how well our trousers fit, and it can absolutely ruin or make a day. You know, you feel so great if you've lost 1 pound or maintained, and absolutely like soul-crushingly bad if you you know, aren't losing weight rapidly or have plateaued or have gained weight.
Dieting hooks into this wider discourse of self-optimization, self-improvement, ideas about the extent to which we can self-improve and change who we are, how we look, and so on. That became really, really pronounced in the 20th century when, you know, self-help as a genre exploded, and when people, you know, began to think that they can change themselves in very fundamental way, including their physical appearance.
I went to Ireland and I got there and I was very weak and I was just exhausted and consumed. It cost me a lot of energy to walk down the street. I couldn't sit in the back of a car or I'd be in pain. I was always very cold, and I was starving. You know, I used to dream about food. People around me really reacted in a very upset way that I hadn't seen in a while. And I think that was when it really hit home that something was wrong. So I had my kind of breakdown or dark night of the soul, where I literally thought to myself, this is going to kill me. This is going to take my life. And there was a fleeting moment where I accepted that the thought of getting better was that terrifying. Luckily, that was my turning point.
It's kind of the first time that I realised that it's okay to be sweaty. When you're fat, you feel that you're sweating more than other people, you're more out of breath than other people. And because I had to do these runs, I had to do this training because I knew that I had this big thing at the end, this big marathon at the end, I just had to get over those things. Cool. Windsor Triathlon, London, although actually that's the right one. This is my 2017. Kind of did that first marathon and I still didn't feel like a runner, which is insane, because I was running 3 times a week and I'd run a marathon. So, I had a literal medal showing that I was a runner. But I did a triathlon after that the next year, and then the year after that I did another marathon, London Marathon. And I think after that I felt like I was a running person, that I was a runner.
After finally accepting that he is in fact a runner, Martin founded Fat Athletes, which is a running club for people in bigger bodies.
We go for weekly runs. Sometimes we try different exercises like a bit of yoga or swimming. And the idea is it's a group. So there's kind of safety in numbers. It's just about kind of feeling good in the body that you have, getting a bit of sweat and having some new friends.
The more time we spend in our heads thinking about what we look like to other people, the more time we don't live our life and fulfill our potential and actually love our bodies for what they let us do every day. From my 11-year-old lying in a hospital bed, I wish I could tell her that her looking fat is the most unimportant thing, and your life is so much bigger than what you look like. Your life is so much bigger than your beauty, and you are so much more than what you look like and how much you weigh.